How high's the water, Mama? 2 feet high and rising. How high's the water, Papa? She said it's 2 feet high and rising. Well, we can make it to the road in a homemade boat, 'cause that's the only thing we got left that'll float. It's already over all the wheat and oats, 2 feet high and rising. How high's the water, Mama? 3 feet. How high's the water, Mama? 2 feet high and rising. How high's the water, Papa? She said it's 2 feet high and rising. Well, we can make it to the road in a homemade boat, 'cause that's the only thing we got left that'll float. It's already over all the wheat and oats, 2 feet high and rising.
We have had a tremendous winter this year. We've had a blast skiing. Hi, and welcome to County Connect. We have had a tremendous winter this year. We've had a blast skiing. Hi, and welcome to County Connections. We have had a tremendous winter this year. We've had a blast skiing Powder, and with any luck, we're going to have a
How high's the water, Mama? 2 feet high and rising. How high's the water, Papa? She said it's 2 feet high and rising. Well, we can make it to the road in a homemade boat, 'cause that's the only thing we got left that'll float. It's already over all the wheat and oats, 2 feet high and rising.
We have had a tremendous winter this year. We've had a blast skiing Powder, and with any luck, we're going to have an even bigger blast kayaking down the rivers this spring. But the not so much fun part of spring runoff is the potential for flooding. And we don't know yet whether we're going to have major flooding, minor flooding, but we do anticipate a lot more water in the river basins than we've had because of such a big winter. I brought with me today a couple of experts. Steve Howard from the Basalt Fire Department, who has been down in Burlington, and if anybody knows about sandbagging, he does. I think he's probably filled, thousands and thousands of sandbags. So welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And also with me is Brian Pettit, who's Director of Public Works for Pitkin County, who will be assisting Steve and learning, like you and I will be, about just the proper way to sandbag. And then Brian's going to fill us in a little bit about what Pitkin County does during spring runoff. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Pat.
Brian and I know nothing about sandbagging. Steve knows everything about sandbagging. So why don't you gentlemen get underway? We're at our Pitkin County sand pile. We've got some bags ready to go. Where should we begin? First of all, I've never even seen a sandbag. These things are made, what are they made out of?
Most of these are made of some type of coated fabric. Very inexpensive. It's basically an updated burlap sack. The key things is that people will tend to want to overfill the bags, and it's harder to carry them, and two, they don't work as well when they're overfilled. So don't try and save money by buying fewer bags and filling them up. And the other thing is much like shoveling snow, we've had a lot of flooding in other parts of the country. We've seen a lot of heart attacks from people filling bags because they're just not used to the stress of it. So again, if you're not in physical shape to do this, properly filled bag is going to weigh anywhere from 35 to 40 pounds. Another reason not to fill them, full bags are weigh as much as 80 pounds. So just be careful, use good body mechanics, don't bend over at the waist, use your legs, and try and minimize as much stress as you can.
Well, let's show the proper way to fill a sandbag, and then if I think of anything along the way, I'll jump in and ask you. So,
the first thing Brian's going to do is he's going to fold over the top of the bag and make a cuff. It does two things. It stiffens up the top of the bag so I can hit the target better, but it gives him a good grip on the bag so it doesn't come out of his hands. And he's going to place the bag close to the ground, support it with his knees, and we're just going to, the art of, this usually gets done pretty fast, so don't be surprised if there's some slop over. Don't do this in your living room.
I like what you said about keeping your knees bent and using proper body position, because I know my husband has a bad back and he wouldn't last 5 minutes doing this with his sore back.
So we take a look at this, it's about half full, and the bags will come with ties on them, but you don't have to use the ties. Matter of fact, most of the bagging we do, we just lay the bags and overlap the open cuffs, and that's more than adequate. If you're going to transport them in the back of a pickup from some site, then you might tie the loops so they don't empty out in transit. The key is don't tie the bag real low. You want a lot of slop in the bag, so tie the tie way up near the top of the bag where it actually exists. Because one of the things when we build the wall is we're going to place them, then we're going to tamp them down. And that tamping, the sand has to be able to move in order for the wall to be tight.
Well, why don't we take our half-filled sandbag, go over and build a wall. Let's show them how it's done. All right, let's go. Okay, we're back, and we've been joined by Roderick O'Connor, who's with the Basalt Police Department, and we needed his extra hand here to build this wall, and we'll be talking to him a little later about just general overview of flood preparedness. But Steve, water is starting to come toward my house here, and my house looks like a warehouse. What do we do next?
Well, what we want to try and do is build a wall using a combination of sandbags and plastic. Typically use 6 mil visqueen plastic. You can get it at any hardware store, Walmart, whatever. And the key is we're only going to slow the water down. We're not going to stop the water. We want to slow it down to a rate that if we have a sump pump or something in the space, we can get that water out as fast as it's coming in. So what we'll start with is we're going to take the plastic, set it up against the building about a foot higher than where we think the water level is going to be. Now this type of wall really only works to a height of about 2 feet. Once you get more than 2 feet high, you really need to have much more substantial protection than a sandbag. Next thing they're going to do is they're going to start to place the sandbags about a foot away from the wall because we want to leave a space for the pump to go into to remove that water. Now, what they'll do is you'll notice that they're going to leave the flaps laying out away from the bag so that when the next bag comes in, they'll be able to seal the previous bag. So what we're doing is we call overlapping the bags. When we build a wall, it's always a combination of overlapping the bags, tamping them in place, and then staggering where the bags lay from each successive layer. So here we have Roderick, he's kind of backing one up right against each other. So what we're going to do is ask him to just push that flap of the first bag, extend it out, and now, if we get a chance to see, now he sets that next bag on top. That's what actually seals the wall.
Now these bags aren't completely full, as we mentioned before, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, the full bag weighs about 80 pounds. We've given an example of what a full bag looks. Roderick's grabbing it right now. It's a good way to hurt yourself when you're building a wall. So, and the other thing is that the bag is overfilled, you can't tamp it down. We talked about earlier, you can't place it properly. They've got the first layer in place now, so what they're going to do is they're going to take the visqueen from the water side and they're going to fold it back up over the first layer. And what they're going to do now is build the second layer on top of this. And again, you can see the indents where the bags overlap. And what they're going to do is just start building another layer. And what we'll do is we're going to finish building the wall, and then we'll come back and take a look and see what it looks like as a finished product.
Great, thanks.
He saw you. Where we stopped off?
Roderick O'Connor, Basalt Police Department. Let's tell everybody a little bit about how we're planning multi-jurisdictionally from Aspen all the way down to Basalt and even Eagle County.
Well, every spring we get together, as you said, with the multi-jurisdictional agencies, and we do an incident management team, and we come up with an incident action plan for the what if that could happen in the valley if the snow melts fast and we end up with some flooding down valley. Now, what the citizens can do as part of their planning is, identify whether they're in a flood zone or not, and then start to plan whether they're going to be staying at their house or if they're going to have to leave if they get evacuated, make sure they've got a go bag, things like that. And the agencies will be mostly watching bridges and taking care of the infrastructure, and the citizens ideally be prepared to take care of themselves and help their neighbors, and we'll be there for emergency situations.
And we want to make that really clear that we'll be watching, Rudai Reservoir and up the Crystal River Valley where the water can lap up over the roads. We don't want our bridges to wash away, but we don't have enough people to come to your house and build your wall for you and bring you your sandbags and your sand, as lovely as that would be. It really is the citizens' responsibility to be prepared for things like this.
That's right, Pat. I mean, each citizen needs to take their own responsibility because if we have a worst case scenario, a lot of things are going to be happening at the same time, and we're going to be out. Public safety is going to be our number one concern, and families need to be taking care of themselves.
Now, when you said a go kit, let's just talk about what is a go kit?
Well, that would be if we had to evacuate you, or if you had to evacuate, just your clothes, your toiletries, some things, some food, things that you could survive in a shelter or away from your home for, say, up to 72 hours before you might be able to come back home.
Now, speaking of shelters, because if you call 911 and you are in a life-threatening situation and you've got water coming and you have to get out of there fast, our sheriff's department, police department will come and help you. Where will they take you?
Right now, the center or the shelter would be at the Eagle County Community Center.
We're talking Basalt now.
Yeah.
If this happens in Basalt, which is...
But that's still the plan right now, to go to Eagle County Community Center when school's in. When school's out, if this were to happen after school's out, then we would have access to the gyms at the school and things like that.
And in the unlikely situation that anything would happen up at this end of the valley in Aspen, I think we use our school campuses up here, but it's much more likely, you're much more low-lying in the Basalt area than we are up here.
Yeah, the floodplain in Basalt area is more critical than up in Aspen. More things are up above the water here in Aspen.
All right, well, Steve and Brian, before we close the program, I just have a couple more questions. Brian, what is Pitkin County prepared to do? What's your main objective during spring runoff as Public Works Director?
Yeah, right now we are monitoring all the bridges and watching the runoff. So as things start to rise, we'll take a more active role in looking at all the bridges, making sure that no debris is getting caught up on any of the piers. Or one of the biggest bridges that we're concerned about is just above Basalt. It's actually the responsibility of CDOT, but it has some of the least clearance between the water level and the bottom of the bridge, and we've had trouble with it in the past. Over the next couple weeks, CDOT's going to begin dredging that and providing some more ability for that water to flow underneath the bridge, but we're still going to watch it in the springtime and be on top of it with heavy equipment if debris gets stuck on bridges. One of the things we're mainly concerned about are logs in the river because they can tend to get caught on piers, get caught on bridges, and cause a problem. So we'll be watching those as well.
I suppose if a citizen sees some debris getting clogged up, they could certainly call and give you a heads up.
Absolutely. We'd appreciate that call. We may or may not take it on depending on how threatening that debris flow is.
The other thing you might want to remember is, I'm a kayaker, and that's why I say this, if you flip, because we're all going to be out there having a blast in the spring runoff, if you flip and you lose your boat and you're not in it, it's a nice gesture to call the sheriff's department and just say, I lost my boat, but I'm not in it. So if you see a boat floating down the river, there's not a person in it. Because a lot of times we go after boats, flip boats.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And also just to understand that we're not going to take care of every strainer that's out there. So if a log gets jammed and a kayaker or rafter sees it, it isn't necessarily the responsibility of the government to make sure the river's safe.
All right, let's talk about sandbags, because that's another thing that citizens have to be prepared with themselves. Where do you get sandbags?
Well, some of the local hardware stores are going to be supplying them. You also can go online if you're used to the internet. You probably can buy them in bulk. Certainly, typically if this is going to happen, it's going to happen in an area where a lot of people are affected. And it's not something you should take on by yourself. I mean, it's a lot of lugging. It might be, for lack of a better term, have a sandbagging party, invite all your neighbors, and you can build up a kind of a chain and hand the bags, split the work up. And also, if there's a group in the neighborhood, if you buy the bags in bulk, the price goes down quite a bit.
I think they can be bought for as little as 27 cents.
So it's 27 is I think the lowest number we've seen. Again, we talked about earlier, don't try and scrimp on bags and overfill them because it won't work. Visqueen, 6mm Visqueen plastic. You don't need fancy tarps. You buy that at any hardware store or department store will have that. Sand, you'll have to probably get a hold of some of the local construction companies and find out where they're getting their sand from. Please don't come up and get it from the public works buildings and the landfill. They won't have sand available. But again, if you go to those local suppliers, they should have it.
And you don't want sandbox sand, because you just need a coarse kind of this stuff. This is
pretty gravelly. Matter of fact, we
gravelly.
Don't want real fine sand, because fine sand works its way out of the bags. So the coarser sand, but you don't want gravel and rocks, because that doesn't work either, because then the bags don't tamp and they don't seal as well. So it's just kind of the same sand that gets put down on the highways.
Now the internet is such a valuable resource, and I was just doing a search the other day, and I looked up how you build a sandbag wall. What is a sandbag? How much do they cost? Where can I get them? All that information is really online. Pitkin County is going to get more and more information on its website. We haven't covered everything there is to know about flood season. We will be communicating with you all through spring and into the end of runoff about what the river levels are doing. We're going to be using newspaper, radio, television to communicate with the public. And you can always call us. You can call the main number at Pitkin County, 920-5200, and ask, and we'll get you to the right resource. Anything else anybody want to add?
Well, I think the big thing is we've seen this from flooding that happens in other parts of the country, is people really have to respect the power of water. We can just think that, 6 inches of water, no big deal, I'll just drive my car through here, I'll just wade through it. Moving water is an incredible, powerful source. I mean, you can take out whole bridges. So don't put yourself at risk to do this. Our focus is to save lives. If we lose property, we try not to do that, but don't risk risk your life just to save property. If the water's coming up, it's coming fast. That's not sandbagging. Sandbagging is slowly rising water.
And I just thought of something. We have an emergency preparedness hotline, which is something kind of new for Pitkin County. The number is 429-1800 in English and Spanish, and it has some of those tips, like if your basement fills up with water and you've got an electrical cord hanging into the water, don't go walking through it and things like that. So you could try calling, see if you learn anything. We won't have up-to-the-minute river level reports on that hotline, but we will have just your basic preparedness information. So for all of us, we got Roderick O'Connor, Steve Howard, Brian Pettit. Thank you so much for joining County Connections. Be safe this spring runoff. Have fun with the water. Be prepared for the water, and see you next time.
3 feet high and rising. How high's the water, Mama? 4 feet high and rising. How high's the water, Papa? She said it's 4 feet high and rising.